What is going on, my blocked buddies? This video is about one of my previous videos, because in there was a strange topic that came up, especially in the comments field down below. People were kind of blasting me, who were kind of angry with me for the fact that I said something along the lines of Nintendo as a company needing to move away from targeting a kids-only audience. I know this is kind of a weird topic because, Nintendo is a brand that makes video games, and video games are often, targeted towards children, especially Nintendo's games. And my point was that Nintendo kind of needed to move away from that, and there was quite a lot of hate in the comments, especially, along the lines of saying, hey, wait, you were once a kid too, right? So that's exactly why you're talking about Nintendo right now. Yeah, there was a lot of hate right there, and I do totally understand that. It made me think about a number of things regarding where Nintendo has been prior to this, where it might be headed as a company, and how that has looked in the public eye. Everyone has a different view on what it is that kids content, and what is kids content, and what is not. And that's totally fine. I'm very interested in what you guys have to say about the general Nintendo audience and what the tone of the games and marketing need to be going to. I think it's time to analyze this, blocked content style. So I think it's fair that we divide this up into different sections. So I have these prepared, comparing Nintendo to the other guys, comparing old Nintendo to new Nintendo, Nintendo's missteps in my opinion, challenge versus an adult experience, and where Nintendo needs to go, in my opinion. So let's start off with comparing Nintendo to the other guys, and with that, I mean the other companies that also make video games, and let's see how they are stacking up right now. So, of course there is Xbox, Microsoft's console, and that is largely dominated by, first-person shooter games. Not entirely, but they really need to sell it on the big Halos of the universe, and of course the Call of Duties as well. And I think that Xbox specifically, not even looking towards PlayStation or Sony at this moment, but Xbox never really had that child-friendly, kids game. They tried it with games like Viva Pinata and stuff like that, but it never really got anywhere. And I think Xbox is not really trying that at the moment. There are a few experiences that are very nice. I think there are a lot of indie games also that are available on Xbox that are very nice for, a broad audience. But just saying, a kid's game for the Xbox, that's not really, on their minds at this moment. So comparing Nintendo to Xbox is like, yeah, of course, Nintendo is missing those, kind of more adult games, the first-person shooter kind of games. The Wii U had Zombie U, and that wasn't a really big hit for Nintendo, so they kind of take note and say, hey, we're making things for a lot of people, and not just for, a certain group. And Xbox, to me, feels, yeah, they're expanding, and they're doing all these cool things, and Scorpio is coming, and I'm very excited about all of that, and I do love me some Halo. That's one of my favorite franchises of all time, but you can't argue the fact that Nintendo is doing a lot more to reach a broader audience. And with PlayStation, it's kind of the same effect, where I feel that they are purely targeting most of a Japanese audience with RPGs, or, a Western audience with RPGs. To me, Xbox says first-person shooters, PlayStation says RPGs, and Nintendo says platforming games, something like that. And yes, the PlayStation consoles, and even like the PlayStation Vita, they're dominated by these obscure anime RPGs or these JRPGs, and even some of the bigger ones, and that's totally fine. I love a lot of the games on PlayStation, but I do like the mascots on the PlayStation, and I kind of wonder where they've gone at this point. The Crash Bandicoots and stuff like that. I really wish that there was something a bit more, and they tried it with PlayStation, All-Stars Battle Royale, and when that game tanked, it was kind of saying, hey, PlayStation, you don't really have recognizable characters all that much. There is the Kratos, there is Nathan Drake, but they are best suited just in their own games. nothing like, creating this family or this feeling of cohesion along the whole universe, which Nintendo does have. So it feels like they're kind of sticking to things that work. Even if you see the games that are coming out, they're kind of sticking to that audience that they know they are able to reach and not really expanding beyond that. I do really love that PlayStation VR is changing that up a little bit, but still, I think that PlayStation is offering a little bit more for a broader audience than the Xbox is doing right now. But all in all, I think Nintendo is still, hitting it more on the mark as far as family friendly goes. Nintendo is more family friendly and not necessarily kid friendly at that. I just call it family friendly because I think a lot of gamers grew up with these Nintendo games, and I feel that it's a very good point to say that Nintendo is not specifically targeting kids with their console, with their graphics, and with their characters, but more or less, a family-friendly vibe. You can't really sit down and play a first-person shooter bloody game with a small kid. Of course, that is what the kids love and what the kids are playing, but probably not what they should be playing. And we've, kind of covered this in our first look video that was just up recently. And to me, it's kind of weird that kids really don't want the platformer games. Most kids just want to play the Overwatches of the world and the Call of Duties, which I kind of get. When I was growing up, of course, Counter-Strike and stuff like that were a big thing, and even in the schools, all the kids were playing that. So I get it, though. I was never one of those kids myself, but I think that Nintendo is doing the right thing, and not necessarily doing the right thing for their company, getting all the third parties on board, and getting the Call of Duties in their system, which they have done prior, but are not really interested in now. I do applaud that fact, because Nintendo is, I think, the family console, right? The, living room, sit down with your friends or family or party members, and just have fun. And to me, PlayStation is this thing where you can really dive into the games, and Xbox, it's similar. But I think Xbox as a whole is targeted towards first-person shooter audience. PlayStation is targeted more towards RPG audience, a little bit broader than that, I would also say. But Nintendo as a whole, even though the games, are mostly, party games or something like platformers, stuff like that, but they are very family friendly, and that is something that the other guys, I think, need. So I think comparing old Nintendo to new Nintendo is very interesting as well. Because back then, old Nintendo, games kept wanting to be cooler. Games kept wanting to be more violent and crazy. Even if you look at the trailers for very old games, like something like Sonic, they're trying to up the ante and saying, we're more adult, kids, you guys want this. And that's kind of, the same thing that's happening right now. Instead, kids are actually playing the actual violent games, which is a bit weird to me, even though I do understand it. But games kept wanting to be cooler, and you can see it in the trailer of the, I think it was Kirby's Adventure, right, for the NES, where Kirby was just swallowing this generic war dude guy with a gun, this army man, and he swallowed him whole, and it was like, yeah, we're Nintendo. And I think Nintendo never really got with those things, really. There are, of course, very violent games that happened on the SNES and the NES back in the day, but when Sonic happened, it didn't really shake Mario's tone at all, if you think about it, because Sonic was this radical, 90s mascot that was all about, speed, and we're cooler than the other guy. Sega does what Nintendo don't, but it never really shook Mario as a franchise, because Mario never tried to be cooler because of Sonic. They were just, trying to stay their own thing. And what Nintendo instead was doing was creating these different franchises with different experiences, and I think also for different, segments of the audience. So they made Zelda, and Zelda isn't necessarily more mature, but it is for a different audience, right? For an audience that isn't necessarily that action-oriented, at least back in the day, but really about thinking and about a bigger world and about puzzling and about a little bit more about story. And Metroid, to me, is a franchise that is targeted towards, the more adult audience, I guess, to, the early, the teenagers, I guess. And Mario is for everyone. So Nintendo did, try and segment that. And of course the franchise evolves into different directions. With Metroid, we had it evolve into the Other M direction, which was a first-person shooter for everyone, basically, because it was not all that violent. And to Other M, which was this more, gigantic story-driven experience that was not really that good of a game. And with Zelda, the exact same thing happened, which was Wind Waker on the other side, which was such a cartoony, for everyone vibe, and Twilight Princess on the other hand, which was for the hardcore gamers and had a little bit more of a dark tone. And with Mario, actually, kind of the same thing was happening there, because you had, on the one hand, Mario Galaxy, which was kind of changing the game, introducing bigger concepts, and even in the Mario lore, if you could call it that, there was a lot more happening with Rosalina and something of the storybook and all that, gigantic cosmic storytelling. We really loved that, all of us. But on the other hand, you had New Super Mario Brothers as a game, and that game was just Peach gets kidnapped, we have to save her, and that's everything there is to it, some Koopalings along the way, and let's do it. So Nintendo is kind of staying the same in the regard that they're, doing things for everyone, but they're segmenting their games to do different things for everyone. Same with Pokemon Sun and Moon coming up, which, they now have Pokemon Go for the people that don't necessarily want to dive into this big story, but just want the experience of catching Pokemon and searching for them, which I think is a really cool thing. But yeah, comparing old Nintendo to new Nintendo, they are more smart with their franchises, because inside these franchises, they're dividing them up and not just saying this franchise is for this audience and Metroid is for an older audience. They're just saying, hey, if you like Federation Force, that is Metroid in a lighter variant. So that is interesting to me. And let's talk about Nintendo's missteps, in my opinion at least, because one of the biggest missteps that Nintendo is making at this moment, which I'm not really that big of a fan of, is sort of neutering games, sort of making them more bland and more normal and more, ununique, I would say. This is happening with the aforementioned Metroid Prime Federation Force, which is saying a lot, because that franchise is so big and so beautiful and such an experience to, traverse the universe, and it was such a big thing to happen to the Metroid franchise as a whole. It shook up everything in that franchise and changed every gamer's perspective on who Samus was as a character, but also the world of Metroid. It made it more lived in and beautiful. And now we got Metroid Prime Federation Force, which is kind of saying, hey, remember Metroid Prime? Here's chibi characters and sort of oversimplified gameplay. And they're doing the exact same thing, of course, with, discussed this a lot, Paper Mario franchise, with Paper Mario Color Splash and Sticker Star as well, saying, hey, we know you love that, story-driven gameplay and all that, in-depth playing, but we are giving you Paper Mario with Toads, with Koopas, with a simple story, and that's it. And to me, Nintendo is doing this a little bit too much. There are ways you can do it very well. Recently I've played a lot of Yoshi's Woolly World, which is a beautiful, awesome game. It has a challenge for the hardcore gamer, but if you are younger, you can just put on that mellow mode and just kind of fly through the levels and have a bit more of an easy experience, which I really love. But Nintendo is sometimes treating their franchises as, wait, we never need to really evolve these things, because if we evolve them, they change. And if they change, we don't really know if our audience would still be okay with it. But as you can see with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a complete evolution of the franchise, people love that. And the same thing happened with, what I mentioned, Metroid Prime, and also Mario Galaxy, and games like even, Mario Sunshine did it, Twilight Princess. They changed the game in sort of major ways that always pay off in the end. There's not one game that was very out there that, Nintendo made that people said, wait, this isn't really my thing. It's more of, Nintendo making something that is so bland and so normal, kind of like the new Mario Tennis game for the Wii U. I don't even know what it's called, Ultra Smash or something? And it was just the blandest, most simple game ever. And its, special divining feature was, grabbing a super mushroom and growing big in the middle of the tennis court. And, those things happening, they are not marketable, they are not special, and your hardcore gamer fans just won't really latch on to that. So I think that you do need that hardcore gamer audience to kind of sell your games to, because they have grown up on the system and they need to evolve with it. The games need to evolve, and even, the young kids, they need that change of experience, because those games that existed, they are still gold now. If I go back and play Super Mario 64, it's still beautiful to me. If I go back and play something like Super Mario World, which is now, of course, included in Super Mario Super Mario Maker, kids still love that game. Kids still love playing in that style. They don't necessarily always go to the new Mario Brothers style, which to me is an indicator of, these games are timeless, and if you don't evolve these things, then they will stay in that time. And I don't really think that's what the games deserve. These games deserve to evolve with us, and change with us. And I think that Nintendo is doing it very well on some fronts with Breath of the Wild, but in other fronts, the Paper Mario franchise and the new Super Marios, I think that Nintendo is kind of, saying, hey, we want this to be simple for everyone, but we need that main franchise that still keeps evolving and growing. So I'm hoping for something like a Mario Galaxy 3 that does that. One of my last points is challenge versus somewhat of an adult experience. So to me, the perfect example is something like Donkey Kong Country. That franchise is still lighthearted, still very cutesy in some ways, but also very hard, a very hard game to play, to get through. And the Donkey Kong Country Returns series, even Tropical Freeze, they still do that very well. They handle that very well. And Yoshi's Woolly World, I mentioned this before, is cute in its visuals, easy in its gameplay, so that could go either way. That is for a younger audience, but if you are a die-hard collectathon, you of course could have your fun in that game in many, many different ways. And I know Nintendo games, even comparing it to the other guys, Nintendo games are overall easier, right? Sometimes there's not even an indicator of difficulty, which sometimes would have made other games more challenging and more fun. But Nintendo kind of does this thing very smartly, where they introduce different concepts or choices within the game that could invite challenge, which they did with the Super Mario Galaxy games, with introducing these comets and having these challenges with purple coins and stuff like that. We love that. And some games, you make your own ceiling. Something like Mario Kart and Smash, playing with other people changes the game and makes you, makes that couch multiplayer really, viable. And couch multiplayer is kind of missing in, whatever PlayStation and Xbox is doing also. So Nintendo banking on, that togetherness, the family vibe that I mentioned before, is so extremely important to me, and I think to also, the hardcore Nintendo fan, and I think even kids, because you need to be able to connect with each other to have this experience, and not just, lock yourself in a dark room with a computer screen and your Counter-Strike or your, whatever. I think you need this lighthearted fun to, kind of see the light side in things. Now, my last point is, where does Nintendo need to go? I'd say, I have these bullet points. Number one is, don't make it for adults. Don't make games for kids, but make it serve the games. Make it serve the story, the franchise history, and just experiment. Things like Mario Sunshine, Wind Waker, and Metroid Prime, they all kind of experimented with the franchise, but it was all the better for it. They learned things from that, and they evolved. It served the story of those games very well, and, of course, Nintendo is working the other way around. Their first gameplay, story second, of course, but make it serve the game. So don't make it specifically for an adult audience or for a kid's audience, but, make the game and see who it connects with, and not necessarily target someone, because targeting someone, that's how you make a game like Sticker Star, and that wasn't really that big of a success. Don't make it oversimplified. This could be misinterpreted as for kids, but oversimplified doesn't really mean that it would be better for kids. Oversimplified means, not giving characters a unique trait in games like Paper Mario, which is not, something that is for kids. Kids really want this very big, colorful thing and things that they can remember, and not necessarily everyone is a Toad, because that'd be easier for your brain to handle. That is a misstep, I think, that Nintendo is making. Where does Nintendo need to go? Don't make games dark just for the sake of it. It worked for games like Twilight Princess. Also, the story really demanded it, and there was already Wind Waker. Include everyone, but make a ceiling for hardcore gamers. We told this before, with challenges in games and having something for the hardcore gamers, but also, the base game being for everyone. Make the games overall more challenging. So I think that overall the games can be a little harder. If you look at a game like Paper Mario Color Splash, that is embarrassingly, simple and easy to play through. If I play Paper Mario, the first one on the Nintendo 64, that was such an incredibly hard game, and I had so much trouble with the final boss when I was a kid. I couldn't really get through that. I had to grind for different items and different things, and I really want that back in a Nintendo game. Maybe I was young, maybe I'm kind of biased, but I do think that Nintendo games overall could be a little bit more challenging. Also, I think market towards the hardcore gamers too. I have never seen a commercial made for the hardcore gamers. So not just bank on the kids, because we are also a massive part of your audience. Kids are, of course, buying a lot of these games and getting a lot of these experiences for them, but I think there could be some commercials for different games in these series that could be targeted to us in a different tone of voice, to the hardcore gamers. And we were all kids before, but we evolve, and we still have a big stake in what's happening with that franchise that we love. So even though I think kids are, of course, the future and what is happening to gaming as a whole, I think if Nintendo were to target these things separately, it would be all the better for it. We wouldn't feel neglected, and we would still stick around for all the next games in the series. Help Nintendo evolve these franchises to make them actually better, and everyone wants a better game, right? Kids are growing up with this too, so keep it, Nintendo. Keep it, and don't forget about the kids that are older now. They didn't get dumped down games when they were young. They got games like Super Metroid, Super Mario World, and The Legend of Zelda for the NES. They got hard games, and it made us better gamers, and it made us appreciate the game length more. I think that's about it. All that I can say about, is Nintendo really for kids? I don't think so inherently. I think Nintendo is for families. Alright guys, I hope you guys like this video. Please remember that we have a Super Mario Maker goodie challenge going. So if you want to win these very cool magnets that you can put up on your fridge and create your own Super Mario Maker level, please put a comment down on this video and tell me why you should be the one to get them. And if it is original, if it is awesome, if it is unique, we will ship these to you, and you could go on creating your own Super Mario Maker awesome level. Anyway, thank you guys. I would love to hear what you guys think about Nintendo being targeted for kids, or should it be targeted to the hardcore gamer, or for families, or for everyone? What is your take on this, and what do you think has happened before, and how do you view Nintendo as a commercial company as well? Anyway, this was Blocked Content. Please hit that subscribe button and become part of our awesome family, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.